In this video, I'm going to go over how to use a text editor to work with source code files. So source code files are files that contain things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. And they're plain text files, which means that they're files that are made up of only characters, really. So you would never use something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word to edit a source code file, because those programs actually put stuff in the files like formatting and style. So the different font sizes and stuff like that. Whereas plain text files are literally just files made up of characters. And there's a few good programs for working with these source code files. One that I recommend is called Atom. So if you just Google Atom, it'll come up. Atom.io is the URL. This is a great text editor. Another good one is called Sublime Text. So just Google Sublime Text, it'll come up, and just go here, sublimetext.com. It's a good option as well. The one that I recommend though, and the one that I use the most now, is called Visual Studio Code, and it's by Microsoft. So just Google Visual Studio Code and it'll come up. You can just go to the first link here and you go to download here. And so most developers really tend to learn one, maybe two editors really well, because they're very important tools in our industry. Getting to know one of these tools very, very well is going to help you to work with code much, much faster and much, much better, because the tools give us all kinds of useful things for working with code. So one of the basic important things they do is they do what's called syntax highlighting, where they color important portions of code to make it easier just to consume the file and read the file, because the important things are sort of highlighted for you. They do other things too, like group together related files into workspaces or projects. So that way, like all the files that are relevant for, say, a given program are grouped together into sort of a workspace or a project that you can then handle as one thing. So we'll drag it into applications here, and then we'll open it up. And it will eventually open. Okay, we'll say open here. So you get a view that's something like this when you first open it. Really, we're at the point where we're just making our first HTML files. So a lot of the options in here that are relevant for developers that are handling bigger projects are not quite relevant for us yet. So I'm actually going to turn off some of these options. But just so you know, there's this Explorer bar here where you can actually see sort of the groupings of files for different projects that you're working on. There's a search option. There's an option for source control here, where source control, those are programs that are used to manage revisions to files. And it's another very, very important tool for developers, but we're not quite there yet. So we're not going to really need this yet. You can also like run and debug programs right in here as well. And there's all kinds of options. There's actually just an incredible amount of options and customization options you have with these editors, but we don't need a lot of them just yet. We're literally just making our first HTML files, right? So what I'm actually going to do is turn off some of these, and throughout the program, I'll sort of organically introduce these options as they become relevant to us one at a time, just so we don't get like overwhelmed trying to think about everything, right? So we'll go here to View, and I'll go to Appearance, and I'll go to Show Sidebar. I'll just click that off. I'm going to go to View, Appearance, and I'll go to Show Activity Bar. I'm going to take that off. So now we've got more of a basic editor here. And the first thing we're going to want to do is create a file and save it and just start working with it. So you can either go to New File here, or you go to File, New File here, or you see this here, Command N, you can use a shortcut to open the file. So if I hit it on my Apple keyboard here, Command N, that'll actually open a file for me as well. Getting to know the different shortcodes like that, the different, not shortcodes, I guess the shortcuts like that, the keyboard shortcuts you use like that, that's actually a great thing to do as a developer, because it lets you work quicker with files and not have to sort of take your hands off the keyboard and go to the mouse and start doing stuff like that. So getting to know those sorts of keyboard shortcuts over time, that can be great. It can save you a lot of time. So we'll just make our first basic HTML file here. So I'm going to make my first HTML element here, my first HTML tag, and I'm going to say open bracket, exclamation mark, doc type, and then HTML, and then close bracket. So this is my first HTML element. It's my first HTML tag. Those words are sometimes used interchangeably, but there is actually a slight difference between them. And what this is basically saying is this is an HTML document. It's telling the browser that this is an HTML document basically. And then I'm going to say here HTML and then close HTML. So I said close HTML. So this here is what's called an opening tag. This is what's called a closing tag. And this is basically going to then contain the actual HTML document content. And this here is basically opening that portion of the document. This is closing that portion of the document. And this slash here, that's what that means. It's a closing tag, we call it. Now together, both of these things together are what we call the HTML element. But one of these we'd call the tag. Now in practice, people use those words interchangeably all the time. I probably will myself, and whatever. It's not a huge deal, but just be aware of that technically that's the difference. And then I'm going to say here head, and I'm going to say close head. Then in here, I'm going to say title, and I'll say hello world, and I'll close the title tag there. And I'm going to save this on the desktop as hello.html. Now notice this, when I go to save it as hello.html, look what happens. The file gets highlighted for us. So the tags here, they're all highlighted with this different color than this content here. And that's considered a pretty important thing with text editors, just the fact that it does that for us, because it tends to make the file much easier to read. Then I'll make one more element here, body, and I got the closed body there. Also notice this, notice what just happened there. I just put in body, right? I just said here, body. And as soon as I close the tag, watch what happens. It made the closed tag for me. So I made the opening tag for body. It made the closed body tag for me. And that's just great because it's just saving me, keyboard typing time to do that, right? It's kind of taking something that I know I needed to do and it's doing it for me automatically. Then I'm going to say hello world in here. So these HTML elements that I just wrote here, these tags that I just wrote here, this head here is basically defining the head of the document, and you put information like the title of the document in there. That's what actually shows up in the browser tab. And then body, this is the actual body of the document containing the actual document structure and content. And all we're going to do is just have the text hello world in there. And I'll save this as hello.html. So I've saved it. If you want to save, you can go file, save, or you can just hit Command S, right? So Command S is going to save you time. Okay, so we save this and we'll open up a tab here and I'll say file open, or I'll just say, I got Firefox here. So I'll just say file, open file, or I'll hit Command O, but I'll open up that file on the desktop now. And we get this here. Hello.html here is being opened up, and we get hello world here. And I'm just going to zoom in so we can see it a bit better, but it's just the text hello world there. Now, what's going on here is that we just opened up an HTML file in the browser, and the browser takes that file and it renders it. It turns the HTML into the actual rendered document in terms of what the user is supposed to see. So you don't see like the actual HTML tags here, right? You don't see like HTML and body and stuff like that. You just see the content here, hello world, and you see the title here, hello world, in the tab there, right? Now HTML code, we can write that to actually modify, how the document is structured, and that's going to actually have an impact on how the actual page is rendered in the browser. Right now, we've really got a basic HTML document though, but that's the basics of using a text editor. Really is, you just create your document, you save it, and then you can open up in the browser or whatever other tool maybe that you're using, and you can consume it that way. And you're getting a different view of it, right? So this is like sort of the source code view. This is the sort of rendered view here, right? So we could do different things in our HTML to have the document render differently. So maybe I get some kind of image, like I'm going to go get a dog image. So I'll say here, dog into Google here. I'll go to images here, and I'm just getting the first image of a dog here. And I'll just save this on my desktop here as dog. And so now on my desktop, I have this dog.jpg file, right? I could use an HTML element to actually include that image on my page here, right? On my rendered page. So I could go back to Visual Studio Code here. And now I'm going to put in an image tag. So I'm going to say image src is equal to dog.jpg. And this is another piece of HTML here. We're going to go over all these tags separately and slower, but this image tag here, what it's doing is it's saying, I want an image on my HTML page. And what I want it to do is be this dog image here. So this dog.jpg file here. And dog.jpg, that is basically the name of the image. It could be something else. It could be in a different location, like somewhere on the web. But because the dog image is in the same folder as this hello.html file, I just have to say dog.jpg. So I'll save that there. And then let's open it up again. So I could open it up again like this, or I could just say refresh. So I could just say Command R. So that option should be in here somewhere. If we go to View Tools, it doesn't look like there's, oh, well, I guess you can always click on this. You can always click on this, right? But you can just also hit Command R or whatever it is on Windows, the equivalent. So I'll just say Command R. It refreshes. I'll zoom out now. And we still have the text hello world there, but now we have this dog image as well, right? We've included this adorable dog image as well. And so that's, you know, I'm zooming in again here. It's kind of affecting how the page is rendered there. But that's sort of the difference here between the source code and the HTML. So the text editor edits the source code. So let's open a Visual Studio Code here. The text editor edits the source code, but that's different than the sort of, you know, view of the HTML page in the browser when it's actually rendered. And we could edit all kinds of source code with Visual Studio Code, not just HTML. We can edit JavaScript, CSS, Python, all kinds of stuff. But this is the basics of using the editor to edit an HTML file. Now, there's just some other stuff I should point out. So one is with HTML, these tags here, they sort of embed content within them, right? So the body tag here, within it, it has like hello world and image source and so forth, right? The head tag has a title here. There could be other stuff in here as well. There could be other sort of content inside the head. But maybe once we've kind of finished working with the head, we're done with it. Like we don't really have any more stuff we want to put inside of it. And we know we're not going to change it again. One thing that the editor gives you is this ability to kind of contract the content. So if you go over here to the left and you just click on this, it'll actually kind of contract that content for us. We can do the same thing with the body here. And it kind of folds it in like that, right? And that might be useful because maybe you're just sort of done with a portion of the content. So you just kind of use this to kind of zip it up and kind of contract it for you while you're making changes to the portion of the file that you are worried about. And that's just like one of many, 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 many cool things that a text editor gives you. Another thing it gives you is it tells you the line and column number you're on. So like this is like line 1, column 1, right? If I go down, I'm on line 2, column 1, line 3, column 1, line 4, column 1. It actually says it down here. So down here in the bottom right here, it says like line 4, column 1. That's actually pretty useful because as you're editing a file, you may have errors or issues on certain line numbers at certain column numbers. And knowing what line number and column number you're on is a important thing as well. It tells us what kind of file it is here. So it says HTML. All these sorts of things are generally speaking customizable too. So one of the things we could customize is the coloring here. That's something a lot of people like to do. This is kind of like a light mode where we've got like a white background and then like, you know, black text and you know, coloring for the different important parts of our document. But you can actually use other themes. So if we were to go to code and go to preferences here and then settings, there's all kinds of stuff we can do. So there's all kinds of stuff we can customize. So like one thing is like the font size, like right here, the font size, I've got it set to 34 right now. You could make it smaller. You can make it like 18, right? And then it's going to be much smaller. You could make it much bigger, you know, change it to 52. It's going to be much bigger now, right? So that's like one thing you can change is you can change the font size. And there's just like, there's so many options that it actually kind of goes beyond the scope of one video to really just talk about all of them. Like just look at all this stuff, right? So there's so many options in a modern text editor that they give you the ability to just change things via searching for them. So if you search for, I believe it's theme. Okay, I searched for theme. Here it says Workbench color theme. So one thing a lot of people like to do is they like to change the theme. And you can even like, I believe, download themes and things like this as well. And you know, and include more themes. But right now I've got it set to like light plus default light. Sometimes people like a dark theme. So you can go to this one here, click on that, and it changes the whole color scheme of the editor, right? If you click over here, it's a totally different coloring scheme now, right? Now you've got like white on black text. And a lot of people like dark mode. Some people say that dark mode is easier on their eyes. So they just like it better. I tend to like the light mode myself. I just find that it seems to just be a little bit better on videos. It seems to be a bit clearer on videos, but I could see why people like dark mode as well. It seems to be maybe less intense on the eyes, but I just thought I'd point that option out to you as well, that you can change that too. Another big thing that you've got with Visual Studio Code that I should point out too is extensions. So this is something, it's one of those things where like there's just so much to talk about. I don't want to bombard you with too much stuff at once, but one of the big things with Visual Studio Code is what's called extensions. So if you go to code here, we go to preferences and I go to extensions. So there are extensions you can add that allow you to do things like print your code out. So like this file here, it's great that I can edit it, but there's no option by default to print out the code. So somebody's made an extension to the editor that allows you to print out code. Maybe you write your code, you want to print it out because you want to show it to somebody or something like that. You could then install this extension and it extends what the text editor can do. It allows you to print out code then. That's huge because the text editor base functionality is already pretty impressive. But with these extensions, you can really, really customize the text editor for all the different jobs you might want to do by, just incorporating these new functionalities. So that's kind of some of the basics of using a text editor to edit an HTML file. I'll be posting all kinds of other videos for actually explaining what all these tags are doing and what their purpose is and things like that. So don't worry too much about that. But that's the basics of using a text editor to work with an HTML file.